Welcome to yet another episode of BurnerCast, the only podcast where we talk anything and everything hot air ballooning. I am Joey Strutz, joined once again by my co-hosts, McKenna Seacrest and Brad Hosmer. How are you guys doing tonight?
Quite well. How are you doing, Joey?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself, McKenna?
I'm doing good. I got the vaccine today, so that's exciting.
For all of our viewers, we are filming this a few months in advance, but today we're going to be previewing one of the biggest competition events in the United States, the Battle Creek Field of Flight. Joining us tonight is a resident of Cereal City itself and the reigning champion of this incredibly high-caliber competitive event. Please welcome our guest, Steve Mitchell, to the show. Hey there, Steve. How you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Great to have you on the show tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
So the first thing we're going to talk about with you tonight is kind of how'd you get your introduction to ballooning?
It's a good question. Well, I guess the first time I really remembered it was when we moved up to Battle Creek. But when I ended up talking to my parents, they reminded me that we actually got a taste of it when we lived in Maumee, Ohio, before we moved up to Michigan. So I think it was an anniversary gift or something, if I remember correctly. But my parents went on a hot air balloon ride, and apparently I was there for the chase in the chase vehicle for that ride. And I do remember a small one time walking out of the house and seeing balloons overhead. So as a kid, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how old I was. It was before first grade. But I just remember seeing that and thinking that was pretty neat. And then there was kind of a pretty long lull before we moved up to Michigan, and then once we moved to Battle Creek for my dad got a new job in Battle Creek with the health systems there, and so we moved up, and the first house that we moved into was a rental, but it was actually right next to where my parents still live today when they built the house, right at the end of the south end of the runway there, the airport, maybe I don't know, half mile south of the airport there. So very quickly, when the Battle Creek Field of Flight came along in the 4th of July week, it was the town is so centered around that event, and it didn't take long for us to get as kids to get hooked. And we'd ride our bikes down to the end of the road, chase them on our bikes into down the street. The house we were renting, we actually, the first balloon, and I to this day don't know how the balloon landed, where it landed, but had a little patch of field in front of our house, and the Sunny Boy landed there. So out of all the balloons to ever land on our property for the first time, we get Sunny Boy. And chase crews coming down the gravel road. We had almost a half-mile long driveway, so we're kind of away from the end of the road, and I think they had speakers or something on the chase vehicle playing music as they were coming down. And that in itself was just exciting. And we chased balloons every summer and looked forward to it ever since.
Yeah, it's such a cool story. I remember you telling me this is, I was younger, and of course I've been to your house before, crewed for you. I've flown out of there before. And that would be such a cool house, especially back in the day, because you're a little older than me, but I was towards the end of the good years of Battle Creek. We had, 150. And of course, like you said, this was, around that time when they had, all the shapes and all the teams. And so that'd be a really cool experience. Do you have any other memories? I know one, like a Winston cigarette pack, they always remind Sean Askren of. That's kind of a funny one.
Yeah. So that's, full circle, right? So we eventually moved into our new house, which just happened to end up being right next to the one we rented when we moved up to Michigan. And we didn't even have grass yet. The next Field of Flight season comes around, and again, we're still new to it. We're still young, and next thing you know, a bunch of chase vehicles are coming down the driveway. We, like I said, no grass or anything. They didn't care. We had Bud Light. We had the Winston cigarette pack, which at the time, talking with Sean, it was definitely him at that time. So would never have guessed that, coming around, actually getting back into the sport, flying, and get to see these same guys that would have, as a kid, I was, they were idols to me. And the balloons were just, we've all been there, right, as kids, and how amazing they are. Heck, first time I went to Albuquerque wasn't that long ago, and I felt like a kid in a candy store. So like that was pretty exciting. The other thing that I really remember too is, like you said, when we used to have the number of shapes that used to come to Battle Creek. we would purposely go plan our trip to the putt golf. I think it was called Crystal Falls at the time. The mini golf there, that's now where Meyer is, kind of in that same corner. And we purposely tried to time it so that by the time we got through about half of the course, which is, if anybody was there and remembers, at the very top of the hill of this course, so we could see into the field and see all the balloons standing up for the glow, especially on the shape night. So that was really exciting and fun to see that from that perspective. And then the other thing I also remember is going down. This must be where my ballooning, beyond competitive edge that I think I have in just about anything I do, if you talk to people that know me, is going down. And that's when some of the team stuff was going on, I think, beyond some of the individual events and championships. I think there were some in the early 90s there, some team championships as well. And I just remember, again, being in Battle Creek at the time and really seeing all the Battle Creek pilots that were on the list and the roster and rooting for them. And then you just watch this guy from Texas come and clean up shop. And I'm like, man, that guy's good. And year after year, it seemed sometimes. So I really remember that because, again, going back and now getting a chance to fly with those guys and compete, almost every weekend is something we never thought really would. It's really a dream come true, to be quite honest.
So you kind of got your start crewing with a pretty unique balloon, so for sake. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was my gateway into ballooning, I would say. So one of my sports in high school, I played 3 different sports, but my main one was football. And during during the summer, we had summer conditioning, I think 3 days a week, like 7:30 in the morning for a few hours. And our football coach basically came out and said, hey guys, you don't have to come lift weights and run in this 90-degree heat, but in turn, you got to go volunteer at the festival this week. And we're like, oh yeah, for sure. And so we went to go do that. And the very first day, I'll never forget, they all lined us up and basically said, hey, so yeah, you guys go over there and park cars over here, and you guys go over there and pick up some trash. You guys go over here. And I was like, that's great. I'm happy to help. Just curious, you have anything else for volunteers? And she goes, well, yeah, we've got quite a lot of balloons that have signed up for volunteer crew, and we don't have enough people to fill those spots. It's much different hours, and you got to come twice a day, sometimes at 4:30 in the morning and stay till 11 o'clock or so at night on glow nights. Does that sound interesting to you? And I was like, oh, you don't know me very well. So yeah, that was my in, and I had no idea who they were pairing me with. At the time, we as crew had to meet at the front edge of the gate, I think along, trying to think of which road it was on, and the gates change every year, it seemed, but we basically had to meet at the front gate. And I'll never forget this either. They told us to look for a specific vehicle and or balloon number. I don't remember. And I stood there and I stood there and I stood there. All the crews came in, some picked up people, some didn't. And all of a sudden I'm like the last one standing, and all the balloons are at the field ready for, briefing. And so I wander in by myself and trying to figure out where and who my pilot is, and finally tracked him down. But yeah, it was Nora Omerad. So the Eyes of Horus balloon, if anybody remembers that. If not, it's tough to find some pictures of her balloon, but they are out there on the internet if you go hunting. But that might be one of the most unique balloons I've been around. So yeah, that was super exciting. She was really nice. Long story short, I helped that year, and as many of us have for stories, we got our first balloon ride with as we were helping to crew, and it was amazing the amount of trust that she had in somebody brand new to crewing, and going back to helping Roy, was her crew chief at the time, to refuel the tanks, and he'd sit there and show you how to do it and what to do, and all the heavy lifting was certainly up to us. And yeah, it was an amazing experience, and one I'll never forget. And the best part is that I think the very next year, I think I crewed a second time, if I remember correctly. And then my brother had an interest in crewing. So we asked, I think if I remember correctly, I did it 2 years in a row, I think. And then the third year, there was I think a mix up in communication, or I wasn't able to connect with her. And so she ended up coming to Battle Creek. And then again, small world example, but I was literally in my parents' front yard. The balloons just happened to come right over the house, and it doesn't happen that often sometimes from that direction, but they actually came from the north, and she flew right overhead, going right out towards the golf course. And I was like, "You remember me? I crewed for you." She goes, "Oh yeah. What are you doing tomorrow morning?" And so I was like, nothing, if that means I get to come help. So yeah, right in the middle of the event, I went to help her again. And my brother James, which most of you probably know very well, or those who are watching know, he got excited too and wanted to know if he could come out and help as well. And that's really, I think, how we both got into it is through crewing, and he got to come out and help. And long story short, I went off to college. He went off to college, but he wanted to do become a pilot, and so I actually went to Western's aviation school. And in doing so, we had talked jokingly about how we fly balloons someday, and little did I know that we would actually do it as quick as we did. So I'll tell you, I'm not the one that persuades my parents very well. My other siblings do a pretty good job of that. So next thing you know, I didn't even know the conversations were happening, quite honestly. I came back from, I don't know, the sophomore, junior year in college for Thanksgiving, and we're sitting down for dinner, and on the basement door, there is all these black and white, you could print out the Cameron, black and white patterns and whatnot. And so there were a bunch of, I think it was firefly patterns all over the door, all different patterns, all different colors. And it was kind of funny, guys. At the time, I kind of like, "Oh, did you guys have like some kids over coloring pictures of balloons and putting them on the wall?" And my mom gets this puzzled look, looks at my dad, looks at my brother, looks at me, is like, "Oh, nobody told you? Your father and brother bought a hot air balloon." I was like, "What?" Nobody wanted to include me in that conversation. So not only had they talked about it and had already bought one at that time, but they had been looking at used balloons, talking to people. I had no idea. So yeah, that's how we got into it, and didn't look back from there. My brother got his license. My dad got his. I chose just to crew whenever I had the ability to and come home and help, but I really concentrated on finishing up college. And for me, the second I finished college, came home, started sending my resumes out. And while I was waiting for that, my brother and I looked at each other. It was like, "We're gonna get your training done." I think about 3 months, we got it all done, because the weather, ended up being perfect some weeks where we could fly every day, morning and night, which that doesn't happen very often either, especially in Michigan, let alone Battle Creek. And yeah, I got my license, about 6 months or so from beginning to end.
Was there anything besides James becoming a pilot that specifically made you want to take that next step and become a pilot?
It definitely helped accelerate the process. Again, I think it was something that we both wanted to do and decide, but he really found a way to unlock that by getting us a balloon and having it, ready by the time I was out of college. But the other thing, even if I had that in my mind during those times, he was full steam ahead. I mean, he was competing in anything he could compete in, and most of the time, if I could make it back for the weekend, I'd crew for him. And I mean, that just made me want to do it even more. Like, I was like, the second I have a chance to get some training time in, I'm going to take advantage of it, because and we've probably all experienced that too, whether it's we decide to stay on the ground for weather, or we're uncomfortable, or we were just crew at the time. Boy, do you want to be in the air bad. We all get that feeling. And so to me, that was probably the biggest driver, I think, is trying to do it sooner than later.
I totally feel that, because the week we had not Battle Creek last year, it was like perfect weather in Iowa, and Adam and Kim McGee were just texting me left and right. They're like, "You should not be going to Battle Creek this week. You're like, you could literally solo this week." Like, it was perfect. Of course, it wasn't Battle Creek as well, I'm like, I already committed to Sitco. And I mean, lo and behold, 10 days later, I got my license anyway. So it kind of all worked out. It's just going to expedite it a little bit. So the main meat potato of this episode is kind of this is like a Battle Creek preview, what you've been talking about so far.
Yep.
So let's talk win in 2019. What did that all mean to you? I know the way you've been talking so far, it means a lot to you, but kind of talk about that a little bit, winning the event and going into that.
Definitely. Yeah, that was, you guys talk about bucket list types of things. That was one of mine. First it was to fly the event, right? Like that's where ballooning became a reality. Well, it turned, a dream to a reality. And then it was, I just want to get into the event and fly it, to say that I flew my hometown event. And finally, I had a chance to do that. I think it was probably 3 or 4 years of me flying. I was able to, because at the time, even still today, just getting your foot in the door, because events only take so many people. So once you're able to kind of get that foot in the door, that was the first step. And so once I was able to fly that event, it was, all right, I'm in it now. This is awesome. Now I want to win it. But at the same time, I'm looking at who I'm flying against. I'm like, national champion, multi-world champion, multinational champion. The list just goes on and on with the type of talented pilots that are coming to this event. And not only that, but the number of pilots too. And the great task calling. So I think only Jim Burke was the task callers until recently, obviously with Phil taking over. But, both of the event directors just call amazing tasks from the point of challenging all of us, but also making it fun. And so, you almost had to have an air-free weekend if you wanted a chance to win Battle Creek. That's the case for most events, quite honestly, but that's where I started. I started with trying to reduce the amount of airs, and I don't want to fly through a PZ and get dinged. I may not be the closest to the X, but let's try to take care of the things I can control for the most part, and just see where it lands me. So you set small goals for yourself. I wanted to get into the top 10. That's still a main goal of mine, and every event I go to is I'm pretty happy if I can try to get in the top 10. Am I happier if I can get top 3? Yeah. Happy if I win? Yes. So very much so. But I don't think it's realistic to have those expectations going into every single event. It's just simply very difficult to do that. So I kept getting closer and closer, I think, through some of my events, and becoming more and more comfortable flying. And I think it was the year before, because I think it was 2017 that I thought I had it. I think, if I have my dates correct. And going into the last flight, I thought I had done enough. I had gone and nailed, I think, all 3 or 4 of the targets that morning. I thought I did enough, looking back at who was near me. We landed, I'm looking at my results. I'm trying to tally up scores. And I like pulled off to the side of the road. Like I was that like almost shaking and nervous, because I don't know, it meant that much to me at the time. And I'm doing the math. I got my crew all doing the math. Everyone's like, yeah, I think, let me check this. And then I'm like, oh no. I had the results. I think I had myself. I can't remember, everybody I was comparing that was up near the top. And I crunched Joe Hartzell's numbers, and he had me by 49 points or something like that. I was like, all right, I got to double, triple check these again. And sure enough, he squeaked it out. And so that was a little bit disheartening, but it certainly didn't break me or anything like that. That was the best I'd ever finished in Battle Creek. So just to have that opportunity was huge. Took a year off because I had my son Grayson, and then came back. And I don't know if anybody knows the story of the first morning of the week I won, but we had gone out south of town. I think it was a 4-part task, I think, if I remember correctly. And we're all, a lot of pilots are out in the same general area, find like a kind of an open cul-de-sac. We're laying out, and Steve Sicko was one of the first ones in our group that had taken off. And the wind shifted right hard. And I'm sitting there. I mean, he's talking 20, 30, 40 degrees off of the first target. And we're not even close. And so we're sitting there. And I think at the time we had seen like 2 or 3 pieballs and really hadn't thought about moving. And I'm setting all my stuff up. I'm inflating. I don't really look to see who's around me necessarily to say like, oh, great, I'm in a good spot because this person's here. But we did have Johnny and Joe were also in the same general cul-de-sac that we were. And once they started seeing some of the balloons in the air and getting feedback from others, they tore all their stuff down and moved. And I sat there, I was standing up and I wanted to do the same thing because to me, I didn't want to start out the first flight of the weekend at the bottom of the barrel, right? Like that just isn't going to set me up for success, knowing how the previous year or 2 years ago when I had a chance, that's where my only biggest mistake was the very first task, the very first morning of that 2017 event. We all took off from the Sunshine Gardens. We're flying north or south, and it was so crowded in there that I was like, you know what, I'm not crowd, even though it's a big area. I was like, I know there's a spot up the street. So I went up the street, ended up not being able to get into the spot I thought. So I ended up taking off with everybody else, but I was the back of the pack, wind shifted, and I think I had 200 points and the Hartzels had 900 something that flight. So at that task, that was the difference. So I'm sitting there criticizing everything I'm doing that very first morning, making sure I'm going to have a solid morning. And I was like, I don't really want to put my crew through this, but it's something we got to do. It's that bad of a wind line that we got to take it down. So we tore it down. I'm sitting there trying to milk the balloon. My brother, who luckily was crewing for me that week, he had some time off, came running up to me and goes, dude, you got to be in the air in like 5-10 minutes. Otherwise the window for the launch period closes. And I was just like, I just lost it. Like, it, looking back, it was a little embarrassing, with some of the family and stuff there, but I really lost my cool for a bit. Ended up torching a little bit of the scoop, trying to quick inflate again, throwing my hat around, knew that was going to be the end of the week. And I was like one of the last ones off the ground that morning. And something happened. I was just scraping treetops, didn't even get to 94 yet. And all of a sudden, gosh, I was in the air 10-15 minutes, literally doing like 1-2K, seeing if anything would happen. And it shifted back. It shifted back hard left. Wasn't anticipating it, but I had no other move. And so far back that I actually had to pop up and miss a PZ before going over the highway. And I was able to go and score fairly well on the first one, not great. I was in the parking lot. Then onto the next one, I think it was inside the legs. But what was important about that next one, which also had me frustrated that morning, is we had a pilot declared goal and we had to declare it at the briefing. And there was no way to change that declared goal unless you were able to write it on your baggie and score it in the scoring area. And we had some miscommunication and it was a scramble out the door. And by the time I was able to enter in the coordinates I thought we wanted to have, they were about 4K to the west of where we actually thought we were going to put it. I mean, it was just going to be killer. So I was able to get my baggie in there, change that declaration, which was huge because then that pilot declared goal. I mean, I think I was 6 meters. So huge difference there. And then I was a meter or two on the last X, and that just set the tone for the week. So I went from, I thought I was just going to be kicking cans and annoyed and pissed off all week, and was able to turn that around. And then the very next morning, I think if I remember correct, I had another really, really good morning where I was also fortunate. I didn't want to be last one off the ground this time because I was the day before and I was frustrated. So we got out and Chris Smart and myself were teaming up, and both of us got off the ground first before anybody else got out there. And we went and nailed at least the first 2 targets, had to scrape the deck to avoid the zoo. So anybody that's flown Battle Creek, man, is that an annoying PZ. Rightfully so, but man, does that take up some space. And I took a risk. Chris actually jumped up to hop over the PZ, and I stayed down on the treetops, under the treetops sometimes if I found a little hole, and was just hoping I didn't accidentally slip in to that corner of the PZ and get dinged. I actually thought there were times I was close enough that the variation in the GPSs, I might I might actually get it. But I didn't. So that was great. Again, I talk about just trying to eliminate mistakes and errors. And that was a big one to me at the time. And then being out in front, we had one other additional target and then one more at the church, the Big Blue Church that everybody probably knows if you've been to Battle Creek. And I got lucky being in front of the pack when the wind shifted there, because what's nice with Battle Creek is you do have GPS scoring. So in that situation, I don't think we had anybody get a physical marker in that target, but when the shift happened, I ended up being one of the closest to it. I think Chad Crabtree actually was the closest on the GPS track, but getting a second and a first that morning was one of the bigger difference makers. And then the weather ended up washing us out most of the weekend, but I felt like a lot of things just happened to go my way. And the morning where they ended up canceling it, I honestly, I was still shell shocked that it was coming true. And it's one of those things that until it's like I've had so many events too, where you think you've done well and then something gets changed, a score or something was GPS screwed up or did something. And what you think you had ended up changing. And so I never really wanted to believe it until we were at the banquet and everything was, signed, sealed, delivered. That's just kind of how I am. But yeah, I mean, I don't, unless I were to win someday, which again, this goes into my bucket list, a national championship or even have a chance at a world championship or anything like that someday. Like, I don't think anything will top that win in Battle Creek, just because of how much it meant to me at the time. And my son was there with me to be able to go up as part of that speech. And so that, yeah, it was that much more special.
Did you ever feel, you didn't fly the event the year before because your son was being born. So did you ever feel rusty coming back to the event in 2019?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily felt rusty, because I think I had some good flying under my belt. I think Battle Creek, it was maybe 2 or 3 events that I ended up missing that year, but I was able to still fly some of my other events later in the year, and then get back into it with Frankenmuth at the beginning of 2019. So I think flying in general, as far as like being able to fly the balloon, I felt pretty comfortable in at the time. I think, Battle Creek is a unique experience for me because that's the only one I'm not staying at a hotel. So for me, the advantage that I think I have in Battle Creek, I think it has nothing to do with flying or knowing the winds or anything like that, because quite honestly, I did a lot of my training in Battle Creek, but that was only for a limited amount of time. And I did do some fun flights there and obviously had some help crewing. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head every time I go there every year, the tendency is the winds usually in the morning go away, the left goes away, or this happens, or there's a little bit of that, but it's nothing to make it much of a difference at all. To me, I think it's being able to relax a little bit with family, ballooning, especially competitive events, because I am so competitive, I take them more seriously than I think I probably should. And I don't sleep well sometimes. And, I put a lot of pressure on myself, even though I shouldn't. I should be having more fun with it. So if anybody's watching this, please tell me to have more fun with it. Just kidding. I have tons of fun with it, but to me, it's being able to know the area is very comforting. So I think, whereas I maybe the weather isn't a big advantage, knowing the area and being able to relax with family and not be in a hotel and let family and friends kind of distract you from the rest of the week's events. I think it really helps me mentally, because to me, you could be the best pilot to fly a balloon, but there's so much mental part of it that I think a lot of people don't think about and talk about, and how you're able to compose yourself going into briefings. And, that's one less thing for me to think about, is try to figure out where a launch site is. I don't know the area. Can I go this way? Where can I go that way? A lot of times I don't got to use a GPS to kind of get around. Sometimes I do. We get way out of town. I don't know everywhere. But it certainly helps to know, like, hey, I know there's a school down the street that's probably a couple degrees off. Hey, there's a subdivision over there that I know doesn't have power lines. And so those things are a little bit advantageous, I think. But yeah, I don't think the year off was necessarily rusty.
So, and I mean, you're talking about this hometown advantage with Battle Creek, and it really shows. You have an average finish at the event over almost 10 years of flying there of 9.71, which you really see the results of, growing up there and knowing the area.
I didn't know that. So yeah, that's an interesting stat. Yeah, I guess there could be something there, but yeah, I think to me, it's knowing the area is probably the biggest part. And knowing I've got dedicated crew that can be there. That's another challenging thing going into any weekend. And quite honestly, has been a challenge for me to get to nationals and other things when they're really far away. Is I've got family there. So, if I've got, my wife can't make it for part of the week, or my brother's up there, James is up there all the time. Actually, both my brothers are up there now. So, I don't have to have a dedicated person that needs to be there for every single day, every single flight. That is I think a big thing to me, that I can shuffle people in and out without having to worry about, what's going on in the ground. They all know me. They all know, for the most part, how I like to fly, my expectations. I think, Joe Zavada talked about that being a critical part of crew. And while I have great, amazing crew, usually all year round, this is just that extra level of flexibility to be able to shuffle people in for a slightly longer event than your normal, 3-day weekend event.
Cool.
So that helps.
And then for this coming event, do you think that you'll feel rusty after about a year away from flying events?
Ooh. That is probably a more accurate question. Probably. I didn't get much flying done at all last year. I know that's the case for most people, but where I struggle is I actually struggle flying for fun, which I wish that goes back to a lot of crew, timing, family, weather, you name it. Ballooning of, organized events are actually my out for being able to have like structured weekend where I know I've got that dedicated to be there. My crew's dedicated to be there. So yeah, even going into the first of it, I'll be really, really rusty. And I know, because how a lot of events this year are approaching them, not everybody's invited to the same events this year. A lot of them are downsizing a bit, with COVID and everything, and have some restrictions that either pilots that have been there the longest, or they're local, or just anything like that. So there's a few events where I would normally have some extra time to, almost like 2018 and 19, where I had some time off with Grayson. I was able to still fly some other events. I think I'll only have 1 or 2 events before I head into Battle Creek. So I think unless I find some time to get out and really get some flying in. And quite honestly, I'd love to go out and do some practicing, which I hardly ever get to do. It's normally, if I get a chance to go fly, I'm just going for a fun flight and not being able to do, some of that honing in of skills that we would really like to. So that's a good question, McKenna. I have a feeling I'll be a little rusty going in this year. Hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So we know you have some really interesting stories, flying in Battle Creek so often. One that really caught our eye came during the 2016 event where you lost your cell phone mid-flight. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. I think that was another frustrating morning where we were coming from the southeast, headed up to the northwest, actually headed towards my parents' house. That's part of where this goes. But yeah, it was funny enough though that you bring that up. The task that I ended up messing up and kind of bummed out the rest of the morning was that same property, which actually is the picture in my background right now, where we had the X that was, off the side of the road. You had to either try to get it in the grass or on the road, or I can't remember that particular morning, but I did not pick the right line, or the wind shifted, or whatever the excuse that most of us pilots had happened to me on that first one. And I was bummed because it was that task, and I think just one other that morning. I mean, you had 2 shots at it, and so we had to try to there was a little bit of a box, if I remember correctly, but it was up there. I think Dom Bareford actually ended up getting into it and boxed back, if I remember correctly. I don't know if he scored in time, but it was up there. But you had to go way up, and we tried. I just kept stalling out. I felt like it wasn't worth it, and so I was like, all right, time to move on to the next one. And then if I remember the tasks right, the target was actually just south of my parents' driveway in the next subdivision, next door, and I had grandparents over. And so I thought, hey, I'm just flying level, headed that way. I'm going to give them a call and let it, grandparents hardly ever get the chance. They come and visit, but they hardly get a chance to come and really watch us or watch me fly. So that would be awesome to hey, grab your cup of coffee and come outside and check me out as I'm flying by. And as I'm doing that, I think I took a picture of the direction we were heading. I think I sent a text to my mom. I was doing it was a newer phone, so it was much bigger. And the weight, man, I just knew it in my hand. It just tumbled out of my hand as I was trying to do it one-handed. And I was about 3,000 feet at the time. And
That's gotta have been the worst feeling.
Oh, right out the front. And I was like bumbling it, and it went, and I'll never forget that sound. It sounded like a prop on an engine, because it just started spinning. I didn't think a phone could make that kind of noise. It spun so fast that it literally sounded like a prop on a plane. It was insane. And so now I'm annoyed. It pissed off because I already missed the target. Financially, I'm not in, I was in a spot probably at the time where, every dime counted. So, I tried to win a little bit of money to pay for expenses on the weekend. Now I just lost my iPhone over the side, so I got to pay for that. Previous years, I think down in nationals, had not good experience with breaking. I think I put my knee through my phone, so I had to replace a phone there. My brother broke a laptop, if I remember. We just not a great history of our technology holding up to the event. So anyways, continued on. I scored on the last target, but not great. So it was really kind of a bummer morning. Went back to refuel, and someone was like, hey, or just we're just chatting, and I was like, you'll never guess what I did. And I think it was actually might have been Johnny Petrin, because I know he was picking on me a bit, next couple of years, don't drop your phone, or taking pictures of me. Like, this is where I think he has a picture. He goes, this might have been where it happened, photo, in-flight photo of the day, Steve Mitchell dropping his phone out of a balloon. One of those types of things. And I think someone suggested, like, hey, maybe you should go find it. I was like, yeah, right. Like, when I dropped it, I looked down, it was over just dense woods. I mean, not near any road, woods. It's gone. Not only that, but it's not going to survive the drop, right? So I'm sitting there, I refuel. Someone gave me their phone. I was like, yeah, I should do the Find My iPhone. I was like, oh yeah, okay. So it was like it was Rick Herbert maybe, and I'm sitting there punching in my info, and it's trying to find the signal, and all of a sudden, bloop, it pops up, and I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me, because not only did it pick up a signal, it was just down the street from us, off the same road as the airport, at one of the churches right off of Helmer there, with the big grass yard in the front. And I was like, oh, no way. So sure enough, take my phone and my crew, we go to the church, walking through the front grass, and it literally took me right up to exactly where the phone was with the dot on the Find My iPhone. And it was, I think I have a picture of it somewhere. It was face down. I had I think it was an OtterBox at the time, picked it up. What a scratch on it. So yeah, I was ecstatic. 1, 2, shocked. 3, I was like, I got to send this into OtterBox and tell them the story. I mean, I don't even want anything from them. I just want to be like, guys, like, you want a real life story. I just dropped your phone out of a 3,000 feet from a balloon. You should put that with your marketing team. And I didn't hear a word, not a single email reply back or nothing. So yeah, what's even better, this story gets even better. I know it doesn't sound like it can, but that very next week, I went to a buddy. Buddy had a boat not far from me here in Ohio, and we're gonna go out for a boat ride. And so I'm just, I don't know, not even waist high water, getting out to his boat and jump in, grab my phone out of my pocket. I was like, oh, I got my phone in my pocket, but then I was like, OtterBox, supposed to be the full waterproof one. Pull it out, it's full of water. And it turned off and it died. That was it. So it survived 3,000 feet and did not survive 2 seconds in water. I found that the case actually had, from the mute button, had a little bit of had a crack in it from muting and unmuting, because I had to always mute my phone at work, and all the water got in and the phone was shot. So all that for nothing.
It's always such a good story to hear, even though how many times I've heard it, and being I was there at the event, it was interesting to be someone in the background and hear the stories. So I've always been curious with you. So you fly, a lot of Battle Creek, you've done nationals. When you go into events like that, is it the same kind of strategy and mentality as you fly the smaller ones like the Frankenmuths and Angolas of the world, or how do you approach different events like that?
Yeah, I know. I'd say I'd approach them differently. One thing I really want to try to make sure is I'm really buttoned up with all the technology. Very much like Joe Zavada, all my maps I carry a paper map, but all my navigation has always been with a GPS and a computer. I don't need the computer. It's literally just a quick visual for me, looking at a PZ real quick. But other than that, it's all visual and GPS for me. But it's making sure I've got all that buttoned up, all of the things that maybe I wouldn't think about doing, making sure that, everything's cleared out. Everything's holding a charge. The right maps are there. They're calibrated correctly. I'll double, triple check calibration on maps just to make sure. I won't trust anybody else doing it. I'll go and do it myself, if it's that big of an event. And then trying to get to know the area, Battle Creek, I know, which I think, again, really helps how relaxed I am going into it. But, going down, when I went down to Texas, completely new area, not even close to anything I've ever done before. I don't know where anything's at. So trying to get a feel for what were past events doing, like what kind of tasks were they calling? Where are targets typically? Sometimes you'll get a list of some of the predetermined targets. Those won't be all the targets, but you get a list of that, and trying to, I might have a dedicated GPS potentially that has all those waypoints already loaded. I'm somebody that doesn't like to have a GPS full of waypoints and have to go. I know it's pretty simple to punch in and find the number. For me, I like to just keep it sequential and, task 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can just very quickly, intuitively select the next one. So I would probably have a dedicated GPS that would have all the waypoints if they give us a pre-populated list. I normally wouldn't do that for a weekend event, just so it's there. But getting there early and looking at the area, drive around town a little bit. I know historically, in Texas, where we were flying there in Longview, there's certain areas you just wouldn't fly for various reasons. And they would typically call tasks in this area of the map on certain wind directions. So trying to familiarize yourself, pull up the Google Maps, go drive to those areas, try to get, I wish I would have done that more, but I did make some efforts to go do some of that stuff, which I wouldn't do, again, going into a smaller weekend. And then also reaching out to other competitors that maybe have flown that area. Instead of just going and learning on my own, which I am most of the time on a small weekend, I'll just go and do that. Tap into some of those guys that have been down there or in that area, and things to watch out for or things to look into, or any tips, tricks, anything like that, to try to, one, just feel prepared, feel like you did your due diligence. I think it's, if you go into any event and you come out, not where you want to come out, you're going to start questioning why that was, and was it something I did for preparation? And I think looking back, I just don't want to have that be one of the reasons, like something that, again, was in my control, because there's lots of things you can't control, right? In any circumstance, but something like that, being prepared, feeling prepared, you can control that. And so I try to do as much of that as I can. So then at the end of the day, I'm not sitting there looking at myself, beating myself up because I didn't take the time to do that. So I say that's a little bit of a different approach that I would take into a big event than just your weekend small event.
Cool. And then if not yourself, who's your pick to win the event this week?
Ooh, boy. I'm glad you excluded myself because I would not pick myself anyways. I'm not like that. Gosh, that's a tough one. That's the thing. Like anybody in the field could win that event. But gosh, if I had to, I think Chris Smart's due to win one of those anytime now. I could very easily see. I feel like Joe's always hovering around there. I'm not sure if he's on the roster this year or not. Quite honestly, I haven't looked recently at the list. I know some people drop out last minute, so. Yeah, pretty good bet if you're betting money is you could bet any Hartzell and have a pretty good shot, or any Petrin. But I think that's what's great about Battle Creek is, and any event, any given weekend, anybody can win an event. So yeah, I know it's a beat around the bush answer, but that's my guess, I guess.
I think us three are gonna kind of like put our predictions in now. You know, we had our little preview this week leading up to the event, so I think it's time to lock in our picks. Brad, who are you picking to win this week?
Ooh. So we're picking on a dark horse. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, let's say pick who you think is like your main pick, and then pick a dark horse too.
All right, my main pick to win, Paul Petrin. That's not a bad pick at all. My dark horse, Brandon Haven. Okay.
All right, McKenna, who are you looking at?
To be honest, I didn't grow up in the area and I don't follow Battle Creek as closely as you guys, but if I had to pick, I would say that I'm rooting for Blake and Cam.
I could see those being pretty good picks too. You know, it's definitely a very, very talented field this year. But it's really hard to get a bet against Rhett Hartzell right now. The guy's been on fire. I think he's gonna pull out the win this week. However, a good dark horse right now is Blake Aldridge and Matt Buslow. Those are the two I'm gonna be watching this week.
You know, Matt was on my heels in 19, so I was actually, before you said that, his name came to mind. So him and watch out for any of those guys coming over from Iowa or that area. Those guys are always in the mix as well.
And then one of the last things we were wondering before fan questions is, do you have anything on your ballooning bucket list that you want to do in ballooning someday?
I do. One of the first ones for me was getting a chance to fly into nationals. So I got that done. Definitely would love, I don't care where it's at. Definitely a bucket list to fly, compete in a worlds. Definitely an international event. The one that comes to mind, Saga. I had a chance to help crew with, Johnny and Paul. It was 2016, if I remember correctly. And man, you talk about a ballooning community. It's just an amazing experience. Everybody needs to go experience Saga in one way or another, whether you're a crew or a pilot. During that event, it's unlike anything else. It's really, truly is special. So I'd love to go fly that event. I know I'm listing a lot of bucket list things, but I think it would be neat to fly over a big stretch of water in a hot air balloon. So you get some of the guys, I think, UK, they go over the channel. I think there's a channel crossing event. There's been talks of people trying to plan a jump over the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan or something like that. Little nerve-wracking, but I think that would be interesting if that's something that could actually be pulled off. So I don't know, something over a big span of water where you have no land would be a little bit of a thrill. And then my brothers. So every time my brother and I start talking about, hey, this would be a great idea, you guys have probably picked up that it ends up happening at some point. But so we'll see. You guys can get back to me if this happens. But we thought it would be pretty neat to get into gas ballooning sometime and team up as a 2-person gas balloon Mitchell team, and go take on the America's Challenge someday at the very least. So I think that would be pretty neat.
So the last thing we got for you tonight is we have our panelist questions, which come from us. We ask every guest. And then we also have some fan questions as well.
Okay, so sounds good.
We're going to start out with our panelist questions. Well, this one was a fan question originally, but it's turned into an every week thing. So Blake Aldridge asks, what is your favorite Marvel movie?
I do chuckle when those come up. Yeah, it was a tough one. The one that came to mind to me, that I remember watching in the theater, which I hardly go to, most of us hardly go to theaters anymore. But when we did see it, Avengers Endgame, I think was a big one for me. I mean, how can you not like Fat Thor? I mean, that in itself, you could just make a movie out of that, I think, and people would pay to see it. So Fat Thor is my favorite.
Do you have a go-to pre-flight meal?
I don't. I'm like probably a few others. I really don't like to eat anything going up. It's probably not the greatest thing to do either, but I do like to try to have at least one cup of coffee to sip on between walking out of briefing and just driving around town. If it's not like a super stressful morning and I can actually do that. But that's not a great idea either. But yeah, usually just a cup of coffee. In the evenings or afternoons, definitely don't try to eat anything at all before that. I usually grab a lunch and then that's about it. But yeah, usually pretty light on meals.
So, much like professional athletes who have, they get an introduction song when they're walking up to the plate or going out onto the court. What would your walk-up song be at an event?
Oh man. I guess I gotta go with one of the first CDs I've ever had, and just I don't know, it's been in my mix of things ever since. Probably like I'd say Metallica, probably Enter Sandman, I think would be a good one. I could see myself coming into that.
If you could have lunch with one ballooning legend, past or present, who would it be?
Ooh, ballooning legend, man, there's so many of them. Yeah, I really have to think about that one. Hey, you guys are stumping me. I actually, so he's a little bit off of, I guess, your normal path of balloonist, but I know he's been involved in it as maybe like a Richard Branson or something like that. Just there's so much, I mean, the things that he has done, just insane. So, somebody like that, I think would be a little bit different. I'm not sure I would get much of a word in, but it would certainly just to see where his mind goes. That would be pretty neat.
What was the first ever event you flew, like as a private pilot?
So I got in at pretty low hours, up in Midland actually. So I was able to get in there with, I can't remember the amount of hours. I was teetering probably right around that 50 minimum. And I hadn't had those many hours up until that point. So it was me trying to spend that, if I remember when that one was at, I think I spent the beginning part of the summer trying to get my hours. They were like, hey, you can get here, we got a spot for you. So yeah, that's where I cut my teeth was Midland. And people, let's see, Rick Kerber reminds me of this. I knew this couldn't go long without me bringing up Rick, but he reminds me that he'll never forget flying into the first target with me and my first event, first target morning. And I had two things that I'll remember from that flight and two different targets. So the first one was flying into the main field, and I just came right in over the X and I was probably 20, 30 feet up, not super low. I wasn't creeping over, they got a lot of light poles and stuff there. So we got balloons coming in, we got poles everywhere. I'm trying to fly the balloon first, and I go to throw my baggie, and I think I'm going to throw right in the middle of the center of the X. First time ever thrown a baggie, except for in a field probably. And it just doesn't go anywhere near where I thought it was going to go. It just almost seems like it drops straight down, very end of the legs where it should have been right in the middle, and I just was so mad and upset. And I think I slapped the bolster and had some choice words for myself. And then I went on to the next target and missed it completely over to the right, but I think there's a video of it somewhere. I'll have to dig it up, but I wound this baggie and it went farther than I think I've ever seen a baggie go. It's all these people over here at the X. I'm barely off the end of the screen, and you just see me winding, and it just overshoots the X and lands on the other side. And I've never had a toss like that ever again. But I just remember landing. I think I got silly stringed by my crew. So that was pretty neat. And then Rick Kerber again reminds me to this day. He goes, "Dude, your first target and you're over the X, and you were mad about that?" And I was like, yeah, see, I have this thing of that I get really upset when I do well in competitions. So yeah, going back, I was even critical of myself in that situation. So yeah, that's a pretty good story from that event.
This next question comes from Jenny Kerber. Really plays off, brother Rick.
Okay.
Do you believe your Michigan teammate brothers help you do well at competitions?
Oh, without a doubt. We talk about, being relaxed and being able to enjoy the weekend. And if I didn't have those guys, as you could tell by my stories, I'd just be beating myself up all weekend. Those guys keep me grounded, and we, are able to crack jokes, bounce ideas off each other. Some of my most memorable flights, and a lot of them, like I said, most of them are competition. I'm up in the air next to one of them and talking with them, last summer, the non-event, Jenny Kerber, how, I couldn't even tell you how tall she was at the time when I met her. And next thing you know, she's right over my right shoulder. We're going into the same X together. And that for both of us was like a dream come true. And being able to work together on the radio at any level, I enjoy doing. And, I think both Rick and I were several thousand feet up one time, and one of those big elbow turning, wind lines where you had to ride it up high and just kind of guess when you're going to come down. And we were just sitting there, and we just kind of both looked at each other and you're like, "You want to go down? Yeah, this looks like a good spot." Pull the red line. We both terminal it down, and we both went right over the center of the X, which wasn't, we didn't think we stood a chance to how big of an angle it was. So like that, and then landing right next to each other after we had taken off together. And especially the connection where I've got his old balloon, his old cat balloon. So that's where the name for my balloon came. It's always been a struggling thing trying to figure out how to name a balloon because I just don't have anything that ties to anything. So I just try things, and I've always been a believer that name will come. It's, the balloons will name themselves for some sort of a reason. You'll come up with it. And I think I named, it was a joke. I named my balloon Scrum Trulescent because talking with my brother, it was an SNL skit with Will Ferrell. And I was like, first time whenever I get a racer, that's what I'm naming my balloon, Scrum Trulescent. And so I named it that, and I had it for a few years, but everyone was like, "Hey, it's the old cat balloon. Hey, that's the old cat. Oh, that's the old cat." I was like, all right, this clearly is the old cat balloon. And it's stuck ever since. And so that's how I got the name. But yeah, there's something to say about camaraderie and friendship throughout ballooning. And, it's not just limited to that group that I fly with on a weekend. It's beyond that. And so like for me, I want to thank you guys for organizing what you got here with this webcasting stuff, and bringing different pilots on from different backgrounds, different experiences, and finding a new avenue to connect pilots, fans, kids to ballooning in a unique way. So, thank you to you guys for doing this. I can only hope that this inspires at least one or more people to go out there and get involved in ballooning in any capacity. You don't have to be a balloon pilot to do it. So kudos to you guys.
We really appreciate that. That was one of our biggest reasons we wanted to start this. Is there's such a youth wave in ballooning right now, and we really wanted to contribute to that. Which kind of brings us into our next fan question, actually, also from Jenny Kerber.
Oh man, she's drilling me.
How do you think the new generation of pilots coming up is going to change competition?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I think they're going to give us all a run for our money. First of all, I'm already looking over my shoulder at the Blakes, the Cams, the Jennies, and you name it. They pick it up quick. They definitely understand it. You know, to me, I got into it with a lot of the technology, and that helps. That's just what I know. And to them, it's going to be second nature as well. But I can tell like there's a passion there. Like the new generation has this passion that I haven't seen in a long time. It's hard to explain, but the dedication that they have to the sport and to competition and to everything in between, you guys included. I mean, you guys are paving the path, and look what you're doing now, right? Like you're holding these types of events and you're connecting people in ways we've never been able to connect before. So to me, you know, beyond how well somebody does or doesn't do in standings and competitions, you know, it's not what it's about, even though we strive for it. It's about building these relationships and growing the sport. And you guys are all doing that. You guys all come from amazing backgrounds and are willing to make these friendships and create platforms like you guys are doing here. And that's, you know, there was a time where we feel like some balloonists are pulling apart, and these are just great examples of you guys pulling us all back together. So it's nothing but going to be fantastic for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool coming from you because, as a young pilot myself, I'm learning, as we go, I want to be a good competitor, much like you. You're somebody I've looked up to for a while. And so, having these, I've learned so much about just preparation for events and, how to be successful at this point. Is just got to get hours, got to get comfortable, got to get practice. And so it's kind of fueling that juice even more and more the more I do this and learn from people. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone's going to find their own, unique way of approaching different things too. So you guys are all doing the right things. All you can do is absorb information, ask questions, go out and try it, find your own different way of doing something a little bit different that you're comfortable with, and you're going to enjoy it. So I think, yeah, you're taking the right approach.
So our next question comes from Jason Pettit. Who's the better pilot, you or your brother?
Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble, Jason. Boy, I that is a hard one to figure out because it goes in waves. So there was a time where every time James came to an event, I knew I didn't stand a chance. I think it was Finley was a good example. I flew my tail off, and I thought, I think there's a YouTube video of that weekend, and it looks like I'm just nailing everything. And at the end of the event, he beats me out, and it's like I'm just like, well, how did you do that? So yeah, I mean, it's hard. I definitely won't say that either of us are a better pilot by any means. I think we're both very capable, and yeah, whenever he's signed up for an event, I know I got my work cut out for me. But what's great is that we work so well together, and we, I attribute that back to when we were crewing, and I was helping him, so he knows exactly what I'm thinking, and vice versa. And so when we get a chance to team up with each other, at a Canton or something like that, I mean, those things are, I wish we could do it more, quite honestly. Between our work schedules, it's been difficult for us to both go to events to fly together because we just feed off each other and have, share ideas and are always aligned. We hardly ever disagree in those types of things. So, yeah, I neither of us is better than the other. I'll tell you that. It's just going to be any given weekend, any given Sunday, if you want to think about the movie that way. But nice try, Jason. You try to get me in trouble.
So we got one more fan question from you. No pilot has ever won Battle Creek in back-to-back years. What would it mean to
Saw that.
time in Battle Creek?
That would be another milestone that I could say nobody else has done. I know it's going to be extremely unlikely. Like you said, look at the history. I honestly, for the longest time, thought it was going to be nearly impossible for me to even be able to win the event. I mean, it's that difficult to win. Anybody can win any weekend with any past history and background. So, like you said, even if you go through that list, there's not even a lot of repeat winners, let alone back-to-back winners at all. So that would be really special. I know it was, not truly an event last year, and it definitely wasn't like a back-to-back win, but being able to go and still do well at that meant quite a bit to me as well. So yeah, it would be very special. I'll be honest, I'll go in there with I'll probably be very critical of myself, but the expectation is, it's the likelihood's not great, but I'll give it my best effort. So yeah, it'd be pretty neat.
Well, that is all we got for you this time on BurnerCast. Steve, thank you again for coming on the show tonight. Good luck in the event this week. Next time we have special guest Adam McGee joining us from our friends over at the Balloon Training Academy. He's going to talk to us a little bit about training pilots and the process of breeding new balloon pilots into the sport. Again, Steve, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on BurnerCast.